When I look back now, I can say we didn't really know what was broken.
Right.
And so how do you fix something when you don't understand the root? And when I started to read attachment theory and the different styles, I was like, wait, this describes the root of my core complaints about him, and vice versa.
So I'm fascinated by the book that you've written and really what you're focusing on. And many people have heard about the 5 love languages, and people have seen the Myers-Briggs personality analysis and Enneagrams and things like that. But what you talk about is something that's really well researched. And you talk about early family experiences, and you've given it a name, or it is known by attachment theory. Tell us what that is.
Go ahead.
All right. Attachment theory is about 70 years of research on what happens when mom and babies connect and go throughout the lifespan. And if you have a lot of memories of comfort, and you have a lot of memories where a parent was able to show feelings and entertain your feelings, then you're going to have what we would call a secure attachment. But for many of us, we don't have any perfect parents because it's not a perfect world. And so attachment theory is just the study of how people connect and how they manage stress and how that impacts them through a lifespan.
And when they're stressed, Kirk, do they go to people for comfort, or do they go to non-relational means to provide comfort for themselves?
That's right, coping mechanisms, and that could be
as well as all the
alcohol
addictions, Kirk, you know, that people turn to make the difficult feelings go away.
So how do you manage difficult emotions is a lot of what they're looking at.
And that's what your book is based on. And I'm highly interested in this because my wife and I have a lot at stake. We've got a lot of skin in the game. We've got 6 kids. We've got 30 years under our belt. I want to cross the finish line strong like you are. You've been married now for how many years?
49.
49 years. That's fantastic.
50.
Hey, that means it's working.
It is.
Keep up what you're doing. Now, tell us why you chose attachment theory as the basis for the book that you wrote.
We were struggling ourselves, and at the 15-year mark in our marriage, even though I was a pastor and we were seeking to apply all the biblical principles we could, we didn't understand why we had a reaction between the two of us that caused us to feel uncomfortable and not do well, and it was a sticking point in our marriage. We discovered, and Kate was introduced to attachment research in her training, and we realized that it was answering a question, why we were struggling in our relationship.
Yeah, it's actually an answer to prayer.
It really was. We really asked the Lord to help us understand that.
When I look back now, I can say we didn't really know what was broken.
Right.
And so how do you fix something when you don't understand the root? And when I started to read attachment theory and the different styles, I was like, wait, this describes the root of my core complaints about him, and vice versa.
Do you think that this, looking back at early family experiences, has a biblical basis to it, or at least you can tie it to Scripture, like maybe something like generational sin or things like that?
That's a great question. And you know what's interesting is when we use that word generational sin, we ask, well, what is that? And it can simply be something that's neglected, Kirk. Like I don't know how to hug my child. I don't know how to talk to my child. I don't know how to sing to my child. And so what happens is that the child grows up without a relational experience. So it's not as though it's necessarily overt sin. It's more of sins of omission in many cases. While there is overt sin, granted, these are often cases where the parents just didn't know better. And so we are, and here's the other thing, many of these imprints are before we have verbal language. In the pre-verbal years, 0 to 18 months, 2 years. So what happens is that we have no retrievable memory about that experience, but it puts into our right brain an implicit memory which says, I'm comfortable in a relationship, I want to go to you when I'm stressed, or I want to run away from you when I'm stressed. And that's an implicit body memory more than an explicit thing that I can recall.
What are some examples of things that may have happened to us in the past that inform how we behave today?
Well, I'll use myself as an example. When I was growing up, I know my parents loved me, but neither one of them knew how to really entertain emotions. If I got sad, my dad said, "You better stop crying or I'm going to give you something to cry about." And my mom just got very anxious. And so I learned early on, feelings are not something that go well. If you just don't show feelings, everybody seems a lot happier. And now it's not a conscious choice on my part. You know, I learned very early to not cry, to keep things to myself. And when I was upset, I didn't learn to go to people. I learned to go to things, or I had a motto of, I'm fine and I'll take care of it myself. And that wasn't a conscious choice. It was a result of experiences that occurred in my family. Lack of development, maybe.
It was a lack of development. And then I grew up in a place where I was afraid. I had a lot of anxiety as a child because I had an explosive parent. And when things got quiet at my house, I knew a storm was coming. Or there had been a big explosion and there was a storm, a quietness for days afterwards. Well, Kay's an introverted avoider, so she doesn't talk a lot. You know, she's more quiet. And if she was quiet or distant, I would start to get very agitated on the inside. And so I'd start to overly pursue her and ask her, "Are you all right? Is everything okay? Are you sure you're okay?"
I'm fine.
Are you
I'm
sure
always
you're
fine.
Stop asking
No,
me these
you're not
questions.
okay.
Exactly.
And so it set up this pursuer-distancer relationship. And that was irritating to both of us.
So then you get married. How do these early life experiences affect the way that we love one another in marriage?
Well, we love one another poorly if we don't understand these truths. The divorce rate outside the church and inside the church is atrocious because we really don't understand these types of interactions and these reactions between the two of us. Marriage is a great exposer because I'm with you all the time. And so I can be great by myself. I'm a great guy all by myself. I crack myself up with my own jokes and I don't bug me. But when I get into a relationship with Kay, I start to feel what I described earlier.
Yeah. These attachment wounds really bloom, especially in primary relationships.
That's right. And they'll bloom with your kids. Your kids can provoke some of these reactions from you as well.
Anxiety and stress is not something that we look forward to, but you talk about how anxiety can actually be a benefit in a relationship. How so?
Well, it actually wasn't a benefit because it caused me to over-pursue her and to literally push her further away because she's going, ew, he's too needy. And then I would say she was too distant. And so that was our complaint toward one another.
Well, I would say stress was helpful in this way. It was the exposer.
It was the exposer. So when we have those bad feelings, go ahead.
Well, when you have the bad feelings, you know, you don't necessarily know what to do with them, but God really answered our prayer. Like, we knew something was wrong, but we didn't know how to fix it. And we had applied biblical principles. We really tried to do whatever the Bible said. And what we found was that God really answered our prayer in sending us this research because it explained the root of where we were struggling and why we were struggling.
It was the root of the bad fruit.
Yes, it was.